First, flight delays, now mounting flight cancellation. Shutdown consequences multiply. We talk with the head of the Air Traffic Controllers Union. GLP-1 drugs, you know the names, Mounjaro, Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound. Prices slashed due to a deal with the White House. The CEO of Novo Nordisk explains when, why, and how. Will Trump tariffs survive the Supreme Court? Oregon's Attorney General, he's leading the case, gives us his take. Also gives us an update on the ongoing legal fight over deploying National Guard forces in Portland. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. No theme tonight, straight to the news on flight delays morphing into cancellations, a disruptive outgrowth of the longest government shutdown in our history. Also, news at the White House on lower drug prices for pharmaceuticals used to treat obesity, diabetes, and heart ailments. And about that shutdown, the stalemate continues even as rank-and-file senators, without permission from their party leaders, hunt the hallways for a compromise, maybe a way out. We will have the latest. Also, a verdict in a trial that was part comedy, part window into what this administration considers a federal case when it comes to protesting or interfering with immigration or law enforcement actions. We start with the prospect of snarling delays at more than 40 airports starting tomorrow. Our senior transportation correspondent, Chris Van Cleve, joins us with the locations, the numbers, and implications. Chris?
Well, Major, you're looking at basically 40 of the nation's busiest airports. All the big ones are on this list, from Atlanta to Washington, all three of the New York City airports, Chicago, Dallas, Houston, Phoenix, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Pick a major airport, it's likely to be impacted here. And what the order basically will say is that the airlines have to cut flying ultimately by 10% at those airports, but it's not starting at 10%. It appears now a compromise came up where the airlines will gradually step up to a 10% flight cut. Right now, we're hearing from airlines that they are thinning their schedules by about 4% for the weekend, and then it will gradually move up to that 10% figure. You're still talking hundreds, if not 1,000 or so flights tomorrow that get wiped off the board on short notice because of the government shutdown. The FAA said the strain on controllers dealing with surging sick calls. These folks have been working without pay now since the shutdown began. Next week, they'll miss their second paycheck. So you've had surging sick calls, which means the folks that are working are dealing with a higher workload. They also have the stress of not being paid, and they were seeing an uptick in fatigue, so they're bringing down the volume of air traffic.
Bringing down the volume of air traffic, what does that mean for security checks at the airport and the general flying public's experience, either with delays, cancellations, or just getting through the line to get to the flight that is still on the board?
You know, the security lines are a separate conversation. That's Department of Homeland Security. But, you know, we are seeing some examples where the sick calls at TSA are resulting in longer lines as well. We certainly saw that play out in Houston this week, where security lines at that airport were stretched into the multiple hours, 3, 4, 5 hour mark there. So there's a level of uncertainty. Almost, I've likened it to shutdown delay roulette. You know there's going to be problems. We just don't know where, when, or how severe. For flyers, the airlines are working to make these decisions today so they can push out by this evening notifications to people whose flights tomorrow have been canceled. We spoke to United Airlines. They are today locking in their cancellations for Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Other airlines are sort of doing this day by day. But the goal is for people who are flying tomorrow, whose flights have been impacted, to make sure they know that today. Let them know what their rebooking options are so they don't get to the airport and are surprised that their flight's not there.
It's always true, but never more true than right now. Check your app and check ahead before you head to the airport. Chris Van Cleve, thank you very, very much. I'm joined now by Nick Daniels. He is the president of the National Air Traffic Controllers Association. Nick, it's great to have you here at the family table. Is there anything in what Secretary Sean Duffy, the Transportation Secretary, and the FAA have announced that you find political, or do you find it all within what the system needs to be done right now to ensure safety?
I believe Secretary Duffy, Administrator Bedford are doing what they believe is best for the system. When you look at it, from coast to coast and what we call NAS-wide, the National Airspace System-wide, anytime that you have an increase of risk, and we've been talking about it for 37 days, that every day that this drags on, risk is going to increase. You have an air traffic controller who's not 100% focused on the job at hand, and they have to be 100%, 100% of the time, but now they're worried about putting gas in their car, they're worried about putting food on the table. They can't even pay for childcare in some instances. So as that risk increases, you have to begin reducing the capacity of the system and take down the number of flights in order to ensure the safety of it.
Your members are now living for 2 paycheck periods in a row with 0 in the column, if I understand it correctly.
Not only 2 paychecks, we only had a partial paycheck going into this. So for 37 days, they've received 0 income for the work that they've done. And a lot of times, that's 60 hours a week.
How is that manifesting? What are your members telling you?
It's manifesting in anger, wanting to, they don't know where to focus it. But it's also frustration, stress, fatigue, their mental well-being. And especially for an air traffic controller, they have a high standard to be able to show up ready for duty each and every day. It's not like you can just go and I'll tough it out today. They have to be ready to ensure the safety of the flying public. So every day that this drags on, it's introducing new problems because these are real people with real lives, and every American can empathize with. If you don't pay anybody, there's going to be issues ahead.
What does this mean for those who are currently working for you, who are in the pipeline in your training procedure? Are people bugging out or just saying, I'm done?
We've seen not only the ones that are already in the system. Today, one of the air traffic controllers was evicted out of their apartment. Air traffic controllers in their facility are rallying around them, which they're not getting paid as well, to help put that rent on their credit cards and make sure that that trainee has a place to live and stay tonight. But the ones that also at Oklahoma City that are trying to become air traffic controllers just to get in the pipeline, they're resigning and quitting as well. So it's happening on all fronts. It's only hurting us and exacerbating the issues that are out there.
Nick, remind my audience how many air traffic controllers the system is currently short of, quite separate from the shutdown drama and inflicted pain.
Now, this was something Secretary Duffy and we share the same vision on, that we have to supercharge the hiring of air traffic controllers, and this is absolutely against it. We only have 10,800 certified controllers operating the system today. It should have 14,633. So we're at 3,800 deficit approximately. It takes 2 to 3 years to train one of these air traffic controllers. And not only are the trainees feeling the pain and the highest cost living of area, lowest paid, it's those who are, in mid-career. We're seeing them start to resign too, because saying, I can't take this anymore, this high stress, this high pressure, and no pay, I'll find something else.
I want you to explain to my audience what you mean and what we hear when you say this is a stressful occupation.
You go to work every single day, and no days, 2 days are the same in an air traffic control world. A lot of people, they go in, they know what their 9 to 5 is going to look like. They know where they're going to sit, what they're going to do, and what tasks they need to complete. We show up not knowing what's going to happen. Is today a day, an emergency is going to happen? I have to be prepared for it. How many planes are going to come through my airspace? Is there weather somewhere? And though the amount of decisions they make tens of thousands of decisions in a single shift of ensuring the safety of the flying public. Most people can't fathom going to work and having to be counted on that every one of those decisions will be criticized, they'll be reviewed, they'll be looked at, and somebody will say, well, we think you need to improve here, or this is, hurting the system. Can you do it differently? Air traffic controllers, we deal with a regimented process and procedures. Right now, those regimented process and procedures are changing rapidly because of all the issues this government shutdown is creating.
And when your bank account is stressed, you are ever more stressed in an already stressful space.
It's not only at work, but you have to go home and explain that to your family as well and bring that stress there and then return to this high consequence job.
Nick Daniels, thank you for coming in. Please keep close as this continues. We hope it ends soon, but we want to talk to you more as it goes on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Major.
Thank you very much. Turning now, literally, to Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill. Nicole, I mentioned in the open that senators are trying to find in the hallways some path toward compromise. What is the latest?
Well, we seem to be making some progress here, at least the most progress we've seen over the last month as this shutdown impasse has continued. You know, Senate Democrats had a pretty lengthy caucus meeting today to try to discuss a potential off-ramp here. You know, you have some moderate senators who have been working in a bipartisan good faith with some of their Republican colleagues to try to come up with a fix here, whereas you have others who are a little bit more dug in, still feel propelled by the results of the election this week, that they may want to dig in their heels a little bit more. So it was kind of a bit of an ongoing discussion among Democrats about how to proceed. But overall, many of them emerged saying that this was a good meeting. Now, according to our sources, what we understand to be the state at play is that it's possible we will see the Senate try to take a procedural vote on some type of measure. It could be the temporary funding bill that the Senate has been voting on for some time now that has failed, but the hope is that they can broaden that out a bit to a larger shell bill, if you will, that would include funding for the government, but also a series of appropriations bills that would fund portions of the government on a longer term basis. This is just an introductory step, or a test vote, if you will, that the Senate is set to take tomorrow to see whether or not Republicans and Democrats are willing, I should say, to come to the table to try to move the ball forward here in terms of trying to find an off-ramp for the shutdown. So still a ways to go, but there's some movement.
When there's any give in the procedural process or some of the technical language in a bill to enlarge it, you know there's at least a path toward a potential compromise. Very quickly, Nicole, important news, not entirely unexpected. Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi announcing she will not seek re-election.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this was not completely unexpected. You know, reading the tea leaves, it seemed that the speaker was kind of moving in, or the former speaker, I should say, was moving in this direction. But she did make it official today in a video post saying that she would not seek re-election after this term. We did talk to a couple of Democrats on Capitol Hill. Here's their reaction.
We've seen her through really good times when we can do amazing work, and we've seen her steely resolve taking us through the tough times.
She's been so helpful to so many of us as we try to navigate Congress, and she's been absolutely life-saving to the country time after time after time.
What an amazing career. You're the GOAT, the greatest of all time.
Now, the universal acronym I keep hearing from many Democrats here on Capitol Hill is GOAT, the greatest of all time. That's how Leader Jeffries referred to her earlier today, along with a number of other key Democrats. Speaker Johnson, for his part, thanked Speaker Pelosi for her service to the Congress, but certainly it leaves a huge hole after the former speaker, has served here in the halls of Congress for almost 4 decades. So the end of an era, if you will, when Nancy Pelosi officially hangs up her hat in 2027.
Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill. Thank you very, very much. Still to come, President Trump says prices are coming down. His Treasury Secretary says there's lots of jobs being created. Voters don't seem to be so sure, not necessarily buying it. I will ask the counselor of the Treasury Secretary about all that next. Plus, Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield, he is here, fresh off bringing his lawsuit challenging President Trump's tariffs to the Supreme Court. And the D.C. man who threw a sandwich at a federal agent said it was a protest. The federal government called it a crime. What did the jury say? The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back. Day 37. You've probably heard it. Bears repeating. Longest government shutdown in American history. U.S. stocks, well, they were down across the board. Dow Jones, nearly 1%. NASDAQ and S&P both down more than 1%. Earlier today, I discussed the shutdown, economic ramifications, jobs, and everything with the counselor to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. His name, Joe Livornia. Listen. Joe, always good to have you. The shutdown drags on, the economic effects becoming more and more visible and feelable across the country.
Oh, for sure. CEA, as Treasury Secretary Bessent had mentioned, had done some analysis saying that we could lose upwards of $15 billion per week. It's about 1 to 2/10 on GDP at an annual rate. So if this goes on for a period of weeks, as it has or continues, you could lose substantial amount of economic output. And at the same time, you're hurting business and consumer confidence. It's not necessary.
Injecting unwelcome uncertainty into an already uncertain economic environment.
I don't want to be political on this, but it's almost have to be because the Democrats, we don't have 60 votes.
In the Senate.
In the Senate to do it. And historical precedent has been you just ultimately vote for a clean CR and not just continue to extend this indefinitely. Democrats did it 13 times under President Biden. I went back and looked under 4 previous Democrat administrations when the Republicans were in a similar spot where they were the minority in the House and in the Senate. They voted for clean CR. So at this point, it's like, okay, enough is enough. Reopen the government because you're just hurting everyday people.
Joe, I've covered lots of presidents in this country, and presidents often consider members of Congress small-minded, harshly political, and they have at times to inject themselves and say, I'm going to resolve this because I'm the president. I'm singularly empowered to do that. I'm going to bang some heads. Is it time for President Trump to do that?
I think, well, I'd also add the word petulant because I think there's a huge element of that on the other side as well. President Trump is trying to do what he can. I mean, the man works literally 24/7, is involved in trade deals and peace deals, economic policy making, and he has had the senators up to the White House yesterday, I believe, for breakfast.
But I mean, everybody, get the leadership there and say we're not leaving until we resolve this and reopen the government.
Well, I think the thing is, if the other side is saying, look, we're demanding that you have to do this and effectively holding the government hostage and shutting it, I don't think there's only so much anyone can do. I mean, you have to be rational. And it seems to me, Major, what's happened is we're just trying to inflict as much pain on the economy and then try to blame it on the Republicans to score political points, which to me is dangerous. It's unhealthy. It's unproductive. Hurts the economy, which is something President Trump always has polled well on. So I guess if you wanted to be a real cynic, you'd say that's why it's being done. Let's hurt him where he has always had the best ratings. Hopefully, at some point, cooler heads will prevail. But, in the Senate, we had 14 votes on a bill. So I don't know when it's going to end. I want it to end soon.
As you know, Joe, right now during the shutdown, most government data is not being collected. So there's a bit of a blind spot. So those of us in your part of the government, my part of journalism, look for other sources of information. Challenger, Gray, and Christmas reported this morning 153,000 announced job losses in the month of October, 1.1 million for the year to date. It says that's the highest rate of job losses since 2020. How concerning are those numbers, and do you take them at face value?
We want to watch them. Those are announced layoffs, could be early retirement, things of that sort. They don't have to occur. I followed that data over the years.
Are they troublesome in any way?
Well, they certainly bear watching, and I think, again, people might be preparing because of this government shutdown to say, look, we need to right-size our workforce because we're worried that there might be some negative effects from the shutdown. We had other data this week from various purchasing managers that shows some strength. The jobless claim numbers have been low when you tally up the state data. If you look at measures of weekly retail sales, they've actually been pretty strong. The American Staffing Association through the month of October has seen rising staffing levels. But those Challenger numbers are certainly worth following. And I think the longer this Democrat-led shutdown persists, the more likely, Major, we might hear more negative news, and it's going to hurt the economy.
So far this year, manufacturing down net, and there is now softness in leisure and hospitality, highly sensitive parts of the economy to consumer spending. Also potentially worries?
Well, we're seeing, as we just were talking about the airlines having, because the flight, the people who work
less
in the
capacity
air traffic
because there
controls.
will be fewer air traffic controllers.
So I mean, and how's that going to impact the leisure and hospitality business? Secretary Besson said, I mean, you've got families that travel extensively over Thanksgiving. It's one of the busiest travel time of the year, and yet the government can't open, and it's going to cause us, again, unnecessary hardship, economic hardship. And look, there'll be a time to negotiate the things that the Democrats want to negotiate, but holding the government hostage effectively, as I've said, to not reopen, to me, just is not the right way to do it.
And right now, from your vantage point, no end in sight?
I wouldn't say no end in sight. There was some movement this past week. Some Democrats seem to be emboldened because of the off-cycle elections on Tuesday to perhaps now run even harder and really try to run the economy off a cliff. I don't think it'll happen. I think President Trump, because he's so business friendly and there's so many positive things on the GDP side and a lot of good news, the economy is pretty immune. It's got a very strong foundation. But the fact that, military pay, with the Secretary's help, we figure out a way to get the armed services men and women paid. But I don't know if that's going to happen on November 15th. Mm-hmm. So I think we're hopefully, it's a sad way to come to a resolution, to get the other side to have some common sense and some nicety. But maybe next week. But I don't know.
Maybe next week.
Maybe next week.
We'll call you back, Joe.
I'm an optimist. I hope so.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
President Trump announces a deal to reduce prices on popular weight loss drugs. Next, I'll speak with the CEO of the company behind Ozempic and Wegovy about this cost-cutting effort. That's next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. President Trump today unveiled agreements designed to reduce the prices of two well-known and pretty popular pharmaceutical companies' weight loss drugs. Under the deals, Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk will offer drugs including Ozempic, Wegovy, and Zepbound at lower prices on the website trumprx.gov, which will launch early next year. Earlier today, I spoke with Mike Dustar, who's the CEO of Novo Nordisk, the manufacturer of Ozempic and Wegovy, after the White House event. Here's our conversation. First question, your GLP-1 drugs, the prices are going to come down. The higher prices were set for a reason. What was the pressure the administration applied to get you to lower them? And what, from a business perspective, will you gain with that lower price?
I think there was actually a good dialogue, constructive dialogue for months now, trying to see how we could reduce the price and expand access, which is all along what our company has been asking for. There are 100 million Americans that are suffering from obesity. Unfortunately, only 4 or 5 million of those right now being treated between the different players, us, Eli Lilly, and the compounders. What about the other 95 million? Someone needs to provide access to them. Well, the problem is that the other group right now are not able to access it, often because of affordability. So I'm incredibly happy that as the price comes down, the number of the patients will go up, and it will be a good win-win for both us as well as the administration.
Do you have the capacity to meet that demand, to make sure people who rely upon these drugs for either obesity or cardiovascular issues or diabetes will have them available?
Absolutely. Our company, Novo Nordisk, went into this business more than 15 years ago. We were the pioneer of this business, and over this period, we have built more capacity than anyone else to treat hundreds of millions of patients globally. So we're ready for it, yes.
There are still some areas where this coverage will not be provided, not through pharmacy benefit managers, not through those companies who provide private insurance to their employers. What's the path to solve that hole in this marketplace?
I would say today marks the beginning of probably a longer journey where access becomes wider, volumes goes higher. 55 million people are insured today in the U.S. through many of those PBMs. Unfortunately, a fraction of those people are right now getting access because of multiple of different barriers that exist. As those barriers will drop, we are ready to expand the access at more affordable prices. But we have to, of course, see the expansion before we can negotiate prices.
In the Oval Office, you mentioned knockoffs. Does this arrangement with the administration protect your company and others who make the GLP-1s from knockoffs, guaranteeing you access to a broader market and minimizing the financial threat of knockoffs?
Long before these negotiations started, we have been basically showing our worry to the administration and to the press and anyone who wants to hear that it is somehow completely crazy that API, raw ingredients, are imported from India and China, are formulated and put into injectable medications that people are putting themselves through without FDA approval. Pharmaceuticals go through years and years of rigorous testing, proving the safety of their drugs, and we want the same safety for the patients when they're injecting any medications.
You said injectables. That's a magic word in this marketplace, but also pills are being developed. Explain to my audience the difference in benefits of either one.
It's a great question. I am absolutely thrilled that we're going to be launching our Wegovy pill starting from next year after the approval from FDA. For the first time ever, you're going to get the same efficacy of an injectable drug, Wegovy, inside a pill, Wegovy pill. 16.6% weight loss. Often, that is not the case. You have to either choose convenience of an oral medication, but then go down on efficacy, or get an injectable at higher efficacy. That trade-off will no longer need to exist with the launch of Wegovy pill that will happen early next year.
Mike, I want to ask you about something that was referred to many times in the Oval Office presentation, that these GLP-1s, helpful, but they're not the only thing. People have to change their life habits to tackle obesity. They have to eat better. They have to exercise more. If they have any addictive problems in their life, they have to address those. Do you have any fear that people will regard your GLP-1s as the only thing that they have to do and de-emphasize those other component parts of changing their lives?
I would hope not. I think that you're exactly correct. People need to live a healthy life, environment that affects you. But we also know that obesity is a disease. Think about lung cancer. Lung cancer is a disease. But can you give lung cancer by over smoking? Absolutely. Just because something is a disease, it doesn't mean that you have to provoke it. And I think, of course, you could give yourself obesity by unhealthy food, by lack of exercise, and that's not really good. But once you have done all that, and you still need support and help, I am so happy that now medications are available, which were not there 20 years ago.
CEO of Novo Nordisk, Mike Dustar, I appreciate your time very much, sir. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
President Trump said today it might be the most important case ever before the Supreme Court. The question, did he exceed authority by using emergency powers to impose sweeping global tariffs? Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield is here in the Conversation Corner, part of a 12-state lawsuit on that very question. He joins me for a conversation right here on The Takeout. Welcome back. The core constitutional limits of tariff authority, whether it's legal to oppose them as President Trump has, was before the Supreme Court just yesterday. The resolution of that case will have implications for this administration and how we regard the fundamentals of constitutional powers and the presidency for decades. It was a skeptical Supreme Court, not just the liberal justices, but those opponent by President Trump who heard oral arguments about all of this yesterday. One of those justices appointed by President Trump, Neil Gorsuch, raised concerns about separation of powers, state and federal government, administration. I'm joined now by Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield. He's been on the program before. Glad to have him in person. He led the lawsuit filed by 12 attorneys general to block the tariffs. Not the only litigants involved. Small businesses are involved. They also brought the case before the court. Dan, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining us. I asked Amy Klobuchar, Democrat from Minnesota, Senator, yesterday, the stakes in this case. She had her own answer. What are your stakes involved in this case?
You know, I think the American people shouldn't look at politicians to trust what's coming out. I think what they should do is look at what the lawyers for Donald Trump say. Yesterday in the court, the lawyer for Donald Trump told every single justice that 30 to 80% of these tariffs are being paid by the American people. 30 to 80% people. Now, people should ask, how much money is that? They're expecting $4 trillion of tariff revenue coming into this country. So you think about the gravity. Even if you just did 25%, let's even cut some money off. That's $1 trillion of money out of Americans' pockets that are coming into the U.S. Treasury. That is a monstrous tax increase by any measure. And it happened with one person in the Oval Office. It didn't happen the way that you have normal tax increases or tax decreases happen through Congress, through your public representatives. So I think that's pretty heavy for the justices to contemplate right now, really Congress effectively ceding that power over to the president in this dynamic.
And I think you would argue, Dan, that even if it was just $1 and it was levied outside the constitutional powers of the presidency, it should be disallowed.
Unquestionably. Think about our history as a country, right? We were a country that went away from having a king, a monarch. And so we created three co-equal branches of a government. We have this principle, and this is what Justice Gorsuch was really talking about. We will never allow one of those branches of government to cede that power to another branch. Because you start doing that, the judiciary gives the power to the executive, Congress gives their power to the executive. Now we got a king. And that's what we're not frowning against. And that's what you hear Justice Gorsuch talking about, the non-delegation doctrine, real wonky stuff, but really important for all Americans to understand.
I want you to evaluate what the president said about this case in the Oval Office earlier today. Please, let's play that.
So much evolves around tariffs as a defensive mechanism for our country, as national security for our countries. I think it would be devastating for our country, but I also think that we'll have to develop a Game 2 plan. We'll see what happens.
Game 2 plan if the Supreme Court rules against the authorities he has claimed for himself.
Yeah, and I think that's appropriate, right? Congress, remember, for Americans need to remember, the Constitution gave Congress the power to tax tariffs. That is solely their power. Now, Congress, in their wisdom, said, hey, we do want to have some flexibility. Let's give the president a little bit of powers here. But they did it with important safeguards. Safeguards for consumers, safeguards for small businesses, because small businesses need predictability. So if the president uses those statutes, follows within those safeguards, he's allowed to do that. In fact, every single president in the history of our country have used those statutes. What happened here is the president didn't like those safeguards, wanted to go outside those and said, hey, I'm going to be real creative and use this emergency power, frankly, abuse an emergency power that no president had ever done. And that's what this case is really about. You know, you can't just dislike what a president says in Brazil and say, hey, shoot, we're going to start taxing coffee at 50%.
Mr. Attorney General, there is an ongoing case about National Guard deployments in Portland. Catch us up.
Yeah, very important thing in Portland, what we've got going on right now is we have inflatable frogs with rechargeable batteries outside the ICE facility. And we have a condition where we're trying to really value folks' ability to protest and speak their will in this world, but they need to do so peacefully. We have a situation where we have a Trump-appointed judge that evaluated the scope and the land of what's going on within Oregon and said, hey, there is no justification for the president to federalize Oregon's National Guard, right? You got to have certain things. You got to have a rebellion, you got to have a threat of an insurrection, or the president isn't able to effectuate the laws of the United States. None of those conditions exist, and we had a trial, factual trial, with witnesses to talk about what's really going on in Oregon. I think what happened is the president was watching social media and, you know,
some of it very dated.
Yeah, and just came to conclusions. And so that's the wonderful thing about our judicial systems. We can talk about the real facts on the ground and say, hey, these conditions don't exist. National Guard, we shouldn't be normalizing the use of the military in our cities. Oregon
Attorney General Dan Rayfield, it's been a pleasure, sir. Thanks for coming in.
Always fun.
A jury has decided about a D.C. man charged with chucking a sub sandwich at a federal agent. We will chew over the verdict. Oh, my gosh. Should we really do that? Yes, with Scott McFarland here on The Takeout. Welcome back. I thank you very much for hanging out with us. Here's a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. Kansas mayor who was reelected Tuesday faces voter fraud charges now. The state's attorney general says Coldwater, Kansas mayor Jose Ceballos voted multiple times. Turns out Ceballos, who's from Mexico, not a citizen, here on a green card. Under the law, permanent legal residents, those with green cards, cannot vote in federal, state, and most local elections. If convicted, Ceballos could face more than 5 years in prison. Supreme Court will allow the Trump administration to enforce passport restrictions targeting transgender people. The move allows the administration to end the use of the X marker on passports and require the documents reflect the passport holder's biological sex at birth. The Biden administration had allowed people to put an X as a gender marker or self-select male or female. The Department of Justice is appealing a judge's order in the criminal case against former FBI Director James Comey to hand over records and evidence to his defense team. The move comes after the department initially agreed to hand over the documents by 5 p.m. Eastern tonight. Comey's lawyers had said they had not seen the documents which had been presented to a grand jury. Magistrate Judge William Fitzpatrick said he was concerned the DOJ chose to, quote, indict first and investigate later, unquote. Comey is charged, you might remember, with lying to Congress. Jurors have found a man who became somewhat of a symbol of resistance to the Trump administration's deployment of National Guard here in D.C., not guilty of misdemeanor assault, not guilty. He was charged with throwing a sandwich at a federal agent. Prosecutors argued Sean Charles Dunn broke the law His attorneys called the case both vindictive and selective in its prosecution. Scott MacFarlane followed all of this, and there are lots of references in the transcript, Scott, to mustard, shards of onion, and whether or not any of that amounted to assaultive behavior. Please give us the details.
Every seat was filled in the courtroom for this. So they set up an overflow room next door. Every seat in the overflow room was filled for this. And I think it's obviously a very campy set of allegations, but I think it did touch a nerve with some group of people who thought that this was overcharged. That how are you charging somebody with a federal crime for throwing a sandwich at a federal agent's Kevlar vest? I think there's an understanding. You don't throw things at people. There's an understanding that this type of conduct, being in the face of a federal agent, vulgar at a federal agent, is objectionable to any number of people. But there was a concern the defense tried to express that this perhaps isn't a criminal federal matter. The jury sided with the defense on this. And it took about a day, half of yesterday, half of today, for the jury to reach its verdict. But it boils down to this. The defendant, Sean Dunn, who did not take the stand, acknowledged throwing a sandwich at the federal agent.
You can't ignore that the evidence is clear that he threw a sandwich at a federal agent.
Clear as day. There was a little bit of a dispute over what became of the sandwich. I'm sorry. The agent who was struck testified that it exploded into a mess of onion and mustard, left a stain, left a smell. The defense argued, perhaps effectively, that how did the sandwich explode if it fell to the ground, still in its wrapper, still intact? That's where this case went. I've never seen anything like it, but I could tell you the interest was there.
And the interest is part of a larger conversation about what this administration alleges and in some other jurisdictions has charged assaultive behavior in any kind of interaction, some of them very casual, some of them nothing more than a bumping of an elbow becoming a federal charge. So kind of a window into that.
Literally the bumping of an elbow in some cases. What we've seen in the first 9 months of this new Department of Justice is that grand juries have rejected cases of that sort. In fact, they've rejected a case of a woman who touched a law enforcement officer. The jury rejected this case. A grand jury had rejected it previously. Department of Justice had to try twice to bring Sean Dunn to trial. So there's obviously some pushback from juries and grand juries about this, but here's the bottom line, and there's no way of getting around this. This trial took place in courtroom 17 of the Washington, D.C. federal courthouse. I sat in that courtroom many, many times and watched many, many defendants convicted of assaulting police for January 6th.
Scott MacFarlane, as always, I thank you, sir, so very much. After 39 years in Congress, Nancy Pelosi not going to run for re-election. We look and evaluate her substantial political legislative legacy. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. As you will soon see, the family table is absolutely full, and we are well fortified with our candy. Joining me now, Republican strategist Alex Conant, Ophira Yeheskel, Director of External Affairs for the Democratic Governors Association, and our one and only political director, Finn Gomez. We've got our candy. It's all good. Here, I want to talk to you first, because on Tuesday, Abigail Spanberger, first female governor in the Commonwealth history of Virginia, and Mikey Sherrill, not only winning, but overperforming what all the polls said. Evaluate.
One, I think historic night, like you said, and I think both Abigail and Mikey had landslide victories in what were supposed to be competitive races that Republicans invested quite a lot of time and money on, because they really drilled home this economic message on affordability and how they're going to lower costs. I think that lane was open to them because President Trump has broken his day one promise that he was going to lower costs for the American people. And I think yesterday people sent a really big message, or on Tuesday sent a really big message about how they feel about that and who they hold accountable for it. And I think Republicans should feel a little scared based on what we saw in Virginia and New Jersey on Tuesday.
I'm sure you saw, as I did, before the election results came in, there was this sort of not so quiet progressive dialogue that both Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill were a little too cautious, a little too biography-driven, not progressive enough, not aggressive on their economic message, predicting they would underperform. They didn't underperform. What does that tell you?
They overperformed, and I think their economic message and focus was the right one to do. As we saw from the results, people spoke really well on how that resonated with them. And I think in contrast, they had two Republican candidates who were not focused on the economy, were trying to do divisive culture wars. Clearly, that did not resonate with people in Virginia and New Jersey. And I think both Abigail and Mikey really honed in on this economic issue that's on people's minds. And Mikey had a day one plan for utility costs in New Jersey. I've been hearing nonstop that that's something that's on people's minds every day. Abigail had plans on healthcare costs, housing costs, energy costs as well. I think people really heard them and appreciated that, and I think that's why we saw such turnout. Amongst key demographics, we had swings with young voters towards us, with African Americans, with Latino voters, with women. Every single person you could hope would turn out for Democrats did, and I think spoke really loudly about what they were feeling.
Alex, how many wounds should Republicans be licking in the aftermath of Tuesday?
I mean, look, these Democrats won off-year elections in blue states. I think everyone needs to settle down a little bit. I think they ran really good campaigns. I'll grant you that. And they were moderate candidates, which I think if Democrats run moderate candidates, they're going to do better than running populist candidates or left-wing candidates. I think we knew that before Tuesday. We know that even better today. I think, as the White House said, the American people are very focused on the economy. Like most voters still think that the economy is not doing strong enough. They're worried about the cost of living. And I think President Trump has taken his eye off the ball at times. I mean, he's spent a lot of times overseas, spent a lot of time worrying about foreign crises, redecorating the White House.
Redecorating is one word.
And I think, and you saw yesterday, the White House's political director said, "Look, we're going to be more focused on the economy moving forward." I think if Republicans stay focused on the economy, we're going to be fine in the midterms. Because it's easy to overread what happened Tuesday night, but look, it's not something we can just completely ignore, and I don't think the White House is.
Finn?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key word is affordability. What James Blair, the White House the political director, deputy chief of staff, said, I mean, it was affordability. And to paraphrase James Carville, it is affordability, stupid. And that is the defining narrative of this cycle. And it was also the defining narrative of last cycle too. If you remember, there was like disaffected voters pointing the finger at the Biden administration. This time around, they've been pointing the finger at the Trump administration.
Latino voters, there's some interesting polling data that contrasts last year with this year.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a new Axios Telemundo poll that just came out that shows that nearly 2 in 3 Latinos say it is a bad time to be a Latino in the United States. In part, it's because of these ICE operations that are happening throughout the country. You've seen them. There's been some very violent, aggressive tactics by ICE, by
And even if
CBP.
they're not touched by it, that indicates they're traumatized at some level.
They see it, yes. They see people who look like them. They're affected by that. And you've seen that switch from last year. But also, again, it's the economy. It's affordability. They feel this squeeze. These are mainly working class, middle class voters, and they're seeing it. They're feeling what everyone else is feeling.
You might have heard there was a mayor's race in New York. Zoran Mamdani won, and President Trump, before the election results came in, communist, going to get nothing, going to beat him up, going to not beat him up metaphorically. Don't go crazy out there. But here's some interesting sound from yesterday in Miami and today in the Oval Office. Please play it.
Let's see how a communist does in New York. We're going to see how that works out. And we'll help him. We'll help him. We want New York to be successful. We'll help him a little bit, maybe.
Zoran Mamdani, you said that, you called him a communist. You said that if he won, you would take drastic action against New York City. What kind of actions are you looking at, and will the ICE deportations continue?
Well, I think you have to look. If he is a communist, there's not going to be a lot of activity. So you wouldn't need bridges and tunnels and all the different things that were being planned for New York, I think. And look, I hope New York does well. That's all I can say.
How do you expect this confrontation to play out over here?
Well, he's a New Yorker himself. I'm sure it has to hurt that I think New Yorkers sent him a really big message on Tuesday about the fact that they want somebody who's focused on costs. And so I would hope that he was willing to work with mayors and governors of all stripes. But I think we've seen also that local leaders are not afraid to take him to court when he's holding up their funding, and they have been successful.
And in that victory speech, Zoran Mamdani made it very clear he is willing to take on President Trump, rhetorically and otherwise. Alex, your take.
Look, communist policies are not going to work in New York. Socialist policies are not going to work in New York City. They're just not going to work. And I think Trump doesn't want to be blamed when things go badly in New York City over the next 3 years.
Finn, you got 20 seconds.
Just real quick, I think what we saw that day, though, is something very Trumpian. In his remarks from Mamdani, we saw a pugilism that we have not seen from the Democratic Party in a while, and I think it's effective and it's going to be working, and I think you'll see that play throughout from here to the midterms. More progressives fighting back.
I think one thing we can all agree on, whether you're a progressive or a conservative or something in between, if your passion for whatever you believe is viewed as authentic, you are going to prevail more than you are going to lose. That is something that has united a lot of results in the past couple, 3 years. Authenticity is hard to define, but they're trying to. Alex Conant, Ophira Yeheskel, Finn Gomez, thank you very much. Happy Thursday, everyone. You know what this is? The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, more than occasionally clever. The Daily Report starts right now.